Hey everybody, Sean from Movie Assault here, and it's time for another video. This time out, I wanted to make an entry into Tim Talks Talkies' new series, or it's not a contest, but it's his new um, community challenge, I guess you would call it, where he wants everybody in the YouTube movie community to pick their top. He wants everybody to pick their top 15, because that's what's going to count towards his community list. But he has also invited everybody to make their top 25 favorite movies of the 1970s. I've also participated in his 1980s and 1990s lists, so I figured it would be a hoot to participate in the 1970s list as well. I am old, older than some people might think. I grew up in the 1970s. That's where I kind of solidified my love of movies. My list will reflect that. It will also reflect that I watched a lot of movies on HBO and went to the drive-in quite a bit. So you'll notice sort of the genres that I watched reflect that. I watched a lot of movies on repeat on cable and going to the drive-in with my parents. And this is in no way to reflect the best movies of the 1970s. These are my favorite movies of the 1970s. So there are going to be some notable omissions. So when people come at me in the comments and are like, why isn't this in there? And there will be two that I know people will come at me and say, why aren't those films on there? They're the greatest films of all time. Good. To you, they are. To me, they're not my favorites. They're great films, but they're not my favorites. So these are my top 25 favorite films of the 1970s. So with that out of the way, let's start with number 25. And it's The Legend of Bogy Creek from 1972. And this movie I saw at the drive-in, and it scared the living bejesus out of me. There are a number of scenes in this film that literally made me want to crawl under the front seats while I was sitting in the back seat. This movie's rated G, and I think this is the reason that this movie haunts the nightmares of many people who are my age. And this, of course, is about Bigfoot, the folk monster, I believe is called. Yeah, the Swamps of Folk. And this movie is just, it's super low budget, and that's sort of its charm, but it's super scary if you're a 5-year-old watching this with your parents and expecting a G-rated family adventure. Number 24 is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from 1971 with Gene Wilder. I have not seen Wonka. I saw Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with Johnny Depp. It didn't come close to this. This movie is also rated G and also kind of trippy. Although I didn't see it until I was very, very much out of the target audience. I saw it when I was managing a movie theater. And I had to watch it before we showed it to audiences, and I had never seen it before. I wasn't allowed to watch it as a kid for some reason, and my parents rarely ever forbade me from watching a film, but I think they thought it was too strange for me or something. So I read the book, and I didn't think it was all that strange as a child, which may say something about me as a kid. Yeah, I loved it as an adult. It's a great film. Gene Wilder is top-notch in that movie, and it's great, and I've seen it several times since then, and it's number 24 on my list. Number 23, also a Gene Wilder film. I don't have a physical copy to pull out, but it's part of this collection I have. It is Young Frankenstein, or Frankenstein. Great film. Another one that I saw many times at the drive-in with my parents. A parody, of course, of the old 1930s horror films. Just an all-around fantastic cast. Cloris Leachman, Peter Boyle, of course, Gene Wilder, Mel Brooks himself. Just an amazing movie. Super funny. And Terry Garr, I can't say enough things about it. I'm doing all of this off the top of my head, so I forget anything or I get something wrong, please forgive me. I'm trying to do this quickly and not spend a lot of time on each film, but I just kind of want to tell you about each film and why I like it. But Young Frankenstein at number 23. At number 22, Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. Brutal film, Great film, fantastic performance from Robert De Niro, Jodie Foster, and oh my God, my names escape me. Peter Boyle is also in this one, and of course Martin Scorsese is in this one. Harvey Keitel, and crucify me, but I can't remember her name. Oh, I'll put it in the text below because it'll come to me as soon as I turn the camera off. Just a fantastic movie, great performances from everybody involved, great direction. This is another one that I saw later in life and came to appreciate. Just a great movie. Just really captures the grunge of the Times Square area in the 1970s, and just sort of the alienation that Robert De Niro's character is feeling. Just a great, great film. At number 21, another powerhouse of the 70s, 1973's The Exorcist. This includes the extended director's cut, but this is another film that I came to appreciate late in life. I was not allowed to see this as a kid for obvious reasons when this came out. I remember my parents going to see it and coming home and just sort of talking about it in sort of hushed whispers, and of course I really wanted to see it, but I didn't really get to see it until I was probably in my 20s, just not because I wasn't allowed to, just because I just didn't get around to doing it. And then watched it much more recently. I think the last time I watched it was maybe 10 years ago, but it's an absolute masterpiece of horror. People who say this isn't scary, I don't think they're giving it enough credit, because it's one of those things it's psychologically scary. It's not gory. Again, people who mistake gore for scares are the people that I just, I feel kind of sad for, because cheap jump scares and gore is not necessarily horror to me. But anyway, that's a whole nother video. Number 20 is 1979's Meatballs with Bill Murray. This and My Bodyguard feature Chris Makepeace, and it was right around this time when this came out, 1979, 1980, that I was going through my awkward phase where I was just really not sure of who I was. I was really kind of geeky and didn't fit in. That's sort of a theme with some of these movies as we go along. I'll kind of talk about that. That's also why there are some movies missing, and why some are included in this list. But the whole "it just doesn't matter" chant in this was key to the formation of my childhood years and my preteen years. But Bill Murray is excellent in this. His attitude was just one of the keystones of my upbringing. Yeah, this is just a classic film, and it's kind of hard to believe this was PG, because you think about it, and you just think about it as being a rated R film for some reason. At least I do, but it is a PG film, and it is a great film. That is at number 20. At number 19, another film about not fitting in and just sort of going and blazing your own path. The Jerk with Steve Martin, Bernadette Peters, and directed by Carl Reiner. This is just a funny-ass movie. Steve Martin was on fire at this time in his career. He was super popular. He had the King Tut song. He had his appearances on Saturday Night Live. He had the Let's Get Small album. And he was just fantastic in this. He's not everybody's cup of tea. I know some people don't like his brand of humor, but back then, I mean, he's popular now with Only Murders in the Building, but that's sort of a different brand of Steve Martin humor. Back then, he was the Jerk, and this movie is hilarious. At number 18 is Dawn of the Dead, another film that I came to appreciate later in life. Just a masterpiece of horror directed by George A. Romero. This is one of the films that I think I never really appreciated how subversive it is until I got a lot older and realized that there are a lot of messages in this. When I was a kid, of course, I thought it was great that people's heads exploded and there was a lot of gore and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's really a lot going on here, and the script is a lot smarter than I gave it when I was 11 years old when it came out. And I didn't get to see it in the theater because I was 11 years old. But when I did see it as early as possible, I don't remember the first time I saw it, but this is just a classic. But it was part of the Halloween 15 last year, and I really, really appreciated it in a whole different way than I did when I first saw it when I was younger. I hate the artwork on this, but this is number 17. This is Tommy, directed by Ken Russell, and this came out in 1975. And this I was obsessed with for a long time. And this, again, is about somebody who doesn't fit in. Of course, it's about a blind, deaf, and dumb boy who plays a mean pinball, played by Roger Daltrey. This is, of course, based on the album by The Who. It features just a ridiculously talented cast: Anne Margaret, Oliver Reed, Tina Turner, Elton John, of course, Roger Daltrey, and many more whose names escape me because I haven't seen this in quite a while, but I was obsessed with this movie in 1980 or so, around 6th grade, when I was obsessed with Meatballs and when I was obsessed with The Jerk and some of the other films that I'm going to show you. But I was sort of going through my awkward phase, but I love this movie. Just sort of the whole alienated person kind of coming into their own, but just absolutely love this movie. Love the music. And I preferred, for some reason, and I don't really think I gave the original Who version of the music much of a chance, but I preferred the soundtrack to the original album. So Tommy from 75. 1978's Grease is number 16, and this is a film I went to see with my dad at the theater, and I am not a person who is a big fan of musicals, as I show 2 musicals back to back. But this one is something this is a movie that came to grow on me a little bit, just because I have good memories of going to see it with my dad and enjoying it sort of against my will. And then just knowing how catchy and fantastic the soundtrack is, and how everybody seems to know every song on this. And I remember, this is kind of a goofy memory I have of this. I remember in 5th grade, we could take albums to school and listen to them at a certain part of the day. And I took Alice Cooper's Schools Out to listen to. And it got voted down. Everybody wanted to listen to the Grease soundtrack instead. Nobody wanted to listen to Alice Cooper. So I kind of resented that, but I've learned to appreciate this soundtrack and this movie much more as an adult. So Grease has made it to number 16 on my list. So there you go. At number 15, these are the ones that count towards Tim Talks Talkies list. It is Time After Time from 1979. This was directed by Nicholas Meyer and stars Malcolm McDowell and Mary Steenburgen and David Warner as Jack the Ripper. This, of course, is the story of, well, of course, if you don't know this movie, you wouldn't know that, but it is H.G. Wells follows Jack the Ripper into modern-day San Francisco, and using a time machine, of course, which, of course, H.G. Wells wrote to the time machine, but, of course, in this film, he also invented a time machine. Excellent performances all around, just an interesting concept, and it really kind of hooked me. I fell in love with Mary Steenburgen in this as a result of this film. Just really hooked me, and one of those films that I watched on HBO all the time. I love this movie. I actually got to meet Malcolm McDowell at Texas Frightmare Weekend in 2011. So I have a signed copy of the DVD in my back room. Really, really enjoyed this film, and that's why it is number 15 on my top 25 of the 70s. Number 14 is Hooper with Burt Reynolds. This was directed by Hal Needham, also stars Jan Michael Vincent, and who else is in this? Sally Field, Brian Keith. This is just a really good story with amazing stunt work. It's really funny. It's a comedy, but it also sort of has a serious message about serious, I'll put air quotes around that, about, how stunt people basically destroy their bodies for their work, and they're always trying to top themselves, and when do they quit? It's a really good movie, and again, another one that I watched on HBO time after time after time. Really loved it. I went to see this in the theater with my father as well. Just love Burt Reynolds in this movie. And in the number 13 entry, also directed by Hal Needham, Smokey and the Bandit. This is a movie I went to see at the theater with my dad, and then I went to see the sequel with my stepfather. My stepfather was just obsessed with Burt Reynolds, wore a cowboy hat all the time, dressed like Burt Reynolds. He was doing cosplay before it was cosplay, except he did it every single day of his life. But this film is just hilariously funny. Sally Field is great. Burt Reynolds, of course, is great. Jackie Gleason is great. Jerry Reed, the soundtrack is really good. I'm not a country music fan, but I love the soundtrack to this movie, Eastbound and Down. The story is fun. The stunts are great. I just can't say enough about this movie. Just an all-time favorite. If it's on TV, I will just sit and watch it because it's really entertaining. Just a fun movie. At number 12 is Animal House, National Lampoon's Animal House with John Belushi. Also features Tim Matheson, John Vernon, Verna Bloom, Thomas Hulse, and Donald Sutherland. Of course, other people as well, Karen Allen, Kevin Bacon. This was one of those films that I would watch on HBO all the time. Of course, as a kid, when this came out in 1978, I was about 11 or 12 when this would show up on HBO. And of course, at that age, I was fascinated with boobs, so I could see boobs when this was on, so that's what attracted me to it. But as I got older, of course, I appreciated it for the comedy. Just a classic movie. John Belushi is so funny in this, but he is not the funniest part of it. The script is genuinely hilarious. So many things that you can just catch in the background, the things people are doing, the sort of subversive political humor. Just the direction by John Landis is really good. I don't know. I can't say enough things about this. It was super influential on the comedies of the 80s. Just all around fantastic. At number... This is a great transition from Animal House at number 12 to number 11, The Muppet Movie, which came out a year after Animal House. That's where I was sort of in that awkward transition phase. The Muppet Movie I went to see at the theater with my dad, and this was the first time I saw an after credits sequence. That's not why it's important to me, because the music in this is great. I love the Muppets. The Muppet Show was one of my favorite things to watch on TV when it came out in 1977. So when I heard there was going to be a Muppet movie, I was super excited. I've always loved the Muppets. I grew up on Sesame Street, but the Muppets moved into sort of a different realm where it wasn't teaching you the alphabet and stuff like that. It was just slapstick comedy. And I just really got into that sort of... It's sort of built on the style of humor that I was into when I used to watch the old 1930s and 40s comedies, Abbott and Costello and Groucho Marx, and this is sort of an update of that type of humor. I just really enjoyed this, and I used to watch this all the time when it was on HBO. And I even took my one friend at the time, who was sort of like one of those people who was always looking down on things that I did as being too kiddie. He was like a year older than me, and he would always say, "Oh, that's too childish," that's I forget what the terminology he used back then. But I dragged him to go with me to see this in the theater again, and he liked it. So it as a rated G movie, it still had charm to somebody who was as jaded as he was at 11 years old. So, The Muppet Movie. All right, at number 10, same year as The Muppet Movie. This is where like I said, I was sort of in that weird age, Over the Edge, and this appealed to me just as much as The Muppet Movie. This is about kids who have nothing to do at a suburban housing development, and they get violent. They're into drugs and drinking and sex, and it's because they're treated like second-class citizens. the parents ignore them. They don't give the kids anything to do, and they're left to their own devices, and that's what they figure out how to do. It's got a great soundtrack, great performance from Matt Dillon. This is coming out. This is an import from Arrow Video that I got that's region free. It's coming out on a domestic release from Shout Select, which I pre-ordered as well because I really love this movie, because it has some new special features on it, because just fantastic movie. Made my top 10. It is just an absolute classic. Yeah, the rock soundtrack includes Cheap Trick, The Ramones, and Van Halen. And this was directed by Jonathan Kaplan. Highly recommend this movie. Search it out. All right, at number 9, also very influential in my upbringing, 1976's Rocky. This, of course, is not Rocky by itself. This is all of the Rocky movies together in one collection, but Rocky's in here. Rocky was about, of course, the underdog who gets a shot at the heavyweight title. You know the story. Just really had an impact on me as a kid. You know, you set your sights on something and go for it. You know, you give the underdog a shot. Really embarrassing revelation. When I was a kid, I really didn't like my first name, Sean, so I always wanted to change it. And there was a magazine called Dynamite that came out in the 70s, and there was a movie poster that came included, and it had stickers, and you could, you know, make this movie poster say starring, you know, and you could put your name on it, and I put my name on it as Rocky. My mom was very upset. But you know the story of Rocky, but Rocky's my number 9 film. Number 8. I really struggled with where to put this film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I love this movie, but there are 7 movies above it that I love just a little bit more, but this was a movie that I would go see at the theater all the time. Just an amazing movie from Steven Spielberg, Richard Dreyfuss, Terry Garr, Melinda Dillon. I can't say enough good things about this. I was fascinated with this. I'm fascinated with UFOs since I was a little kid. Always wanted to be the Richard Dreyfuss character at the end. If you know, you know. I'm not going to spoil anything, but just absolutely fascinating movie. The special effects in this were jaw-dropping in 77 when this came out. I remember this came out right before Christmas in 77, and I think it's all I talked about from then till 1979, I think, when they re-released it in theaters again. Just an excellent, excellent movie. I always wanted to go to Devil's Tower. I still haven't made it. Next up at number 7 is the 1976 King Kong. If Star Wars had never come out and sort of set off the revolution that it did, this may have been my number 1 film of all time. I know it's not as good as the 1933 King Kong, but this is my King Kong. I was obsessed with this movie when I was a kid. I went to see it in the theaters I don't know how many times. Before Star Wars, this was my number 1 film all time of going to see it in the theaters. Back in the day, you couldn't rent movies because there was no VHS, there was no beta, there was no home video. So if you wanted to see a movie, you had to go to the theater to see it. And I would go, this movie stayed in theaters. They would print in the movie ads, they would say, you know, held over for a 40-second week. And I would go almost every other week to see this film. So I don't know how many times I've seen this in the theater. I saw it at the drive-in. I saw it at the multiplex. I saw it at a single screen theater. Anytime it was at a theater locally, I would go at least once. Just an amazing film. When I was 8 years old, I fell in love with Jessica Lange. I wrote her a letter. She sent me an autographed picture that sadly I don't have anymore. I was just obsessed. And I bought into the hype that there was a 25-foot tall robot playing King Kong in every scene in this movie. If you've seen this movie, you know there is a 25-foot robot in this movie who's in it for approximately 5 seconds. And you can tell when that robot shows up because it looks completely like crap. But when I was 8 years old, I thought every scene with King Kong was this 25-foot robot. And then I learned Rick Baker played King Kong in a suit when I was a little bit older. And, you know, that's when you're a kid. You don't know. But anyway, King Kong, 1976. At number 6 is the original Alien from 1979. This was one of those films. I used to read novelizations of films when I wasn't allowed to go to the theater. Um, so I read the novelization of this, which was written by Alan Dean Foster. It was not the same, at least from what I remember after finally seeing the film, it was not the same as the movie. But I really enjoyed this. This was really creepy. I love the sort of lived-in atmosphere of the Nostromo. I loved the design of the creature by H.R. Giger. I love the tension. I love the suspense. And as I get older, I appreciate this movie more and more. I don't know what to say about this movie that hasn't been said by 1,000 other people, but this is just a masterpiece of tension, suspense. When I was a little kid, seeing Sigourney Weaver in her little underwear was confusing and made things uncomfortable for myself when I was younger. But Alien, it's a great, great movie. At number... Oops. I forgot a movie. At number 5 is Superman, the movie from 1978. This is, and I think it will always be, my favorite superhero movie. The Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DCEU and all the stuff that has come out with the CGI and the fantastic effects and the the multiverse and all that stuff. It's all great. Love it. As of late, I have superhero fatigue, but this really was the movie that made me believe a man could fly. This came out when I was 10 years old. I really sat in awe when I was watching the opening credits to this. I believed I was about to see something magical. And yes, I could tell there was, some model effects when, like the dam broke and stuff. But the scenes where Christopher Reeve was flying and landing, I knew obviously the guy couldn't fly, but it was so well done over what I had seen from the George Reeves TV series and other attempts to make superhero or Superman, fly on film or TV. So well done. The story was great, but absolutely Christopher Reeve embodied Superman physically, the spirit of Superman, the wholesomeness, and his Clark Kent was a bumbling idiot, but the fact that he could play both characters so seamlessly was just fantastic. Love this movie to this day. The sequels, of course, are not, they vary in quality. Superman 2, while more action-packed, the Richard Donner cut I prefer over the Richard Lester cut. Superman 3 I have not seen in one sitting all the way through, and Superman 4 is a travesty. But this is a masterpiece. And it's my favorite superhero movie of all time. All right, number 4, Halloween, 1978. This movie scared the crap out of me. I'll tell you the way I watched it. I sat in front of the TV. My mom was sleeping on the couch behind me. This was before remote controls. I sat with my hand on the dial of the TV. We were watching it on HBO, or I was watching it on HBO. She was asleep. And on my TV, you had to turn the TV to channel 3 and press a button on a box to watch HBO. If you didn't press the button in, it just showed this computer text that would just scroll up and show community messages or whatever. So I sat there with my face like this close to the TV with my hand on the dial. So if my mom woke up, I would just turn the channel to something else and pretend like I was watching something else. That's how I watched Halloween for however long this movie is. 91 minutes. I sat there like this, and I was physically and mentally engrossed in this film, and it scared the shit out of me. It may seem tame by today's standards, but the scene where Jamie Lee Curtis looks across the street, or man, I can't remember who looks across the street. I think it's Tommy, the character Tommy, looks across the street and sees Michael Myers silhouetted against the house. That scene alone just is burned into my brain for all eternity. It's so much so that I can't remember who looks across the street. It's just the silhouette of Michael Myers against the house. This movie will always be in my top horror movies of all time. All right, number 3. We're getting there. This one I struggled where to place it. I knew it would be in my top 5. 3 seems appropriate when you see number 1 and number 2, but number 3 is Being There, directed by Hal Ashby and starring Peter Sellers. Also features Shirley MacLaine, Melvin Douglas, and Jack Warden. This movie has always sort of meant a lot to me. I watched it for the very first time when I was 12, I think. Again, that sort of awkward time that I've been talking about through this whole thing. The character of Chance the gardener, or Chauncey Gardner, I've always related to him because throughout my life I've always felt sort of awkward, and I've always sort of felt like I've lucked into situations or sort of bumbled my way into situations or success that was maybe not deserved, a lifelong imposter syndrome, I guess you could call it. And I don't know if that originated with this or not, but I've always sort of felt that way. And I felt that way even when I watched this. I identified with the main character. And I don't know, this movie just sort of spoke to me. But Peter Sellers' performance by far is what propelled this movie to be one of my favorites of all time. I revisit this all the time. This movie also has the powerful effect of putting people to sleep when I show it to them. I don't know how many times I've said to somebody, they'll be like, oh, what's one of your favorite movies that isn't Star Wars or Jaws or Halloween or, whatever. And I tell them this, and like, oh, I've never seen that. I've never heard of it. So I show it to them, and I look over, and they're asleep. It is not an exciting movie. It is a very quiet, gentle, reflective movie. I understand that. It was nominated for many Academy Awards, I think for Best Picture. Melvin Douglas won for Best Supporting Actor. Peter Sellers, I think, should have won for Best Actor. He was nominated. But this is one of my favorite movies ever, not just for the 70s. I think this is not just one of my favorite movies of all time. This is, I think, one of the best movies of all time. I'll die on that hill. Great movie. All right, I sort of gave it away. Number 2, Jaws, 1975, Steven Spielberg, Richard Dreyfuss, Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw. I can't say anything that hasn't been said about this movie thousands of times before. It's a suspense masterpiece, adventure, action. Some call it a horror film. I can't say anything that hasn't been said. If you haven't seen this movie, what are you waiting for? It is a masterpiece. And then last, but definitely not least, my number 1 favorite film of the 70s is 1977's Star Wars. And I'm showing this despecialized edition. I do have it on 4K, but it's part of a gigantic box set of the 4K Skywalker saga that I didn't feel like holding up and showing. But this is the movie as I saw it for the very first time. And the reason I'm showing this version, even though this isn't a legal release, is because this is the way I saw it. This is the way I remember it. And this is the way it really means something to me. The changes and the revisions that George Lucas has made over the years. To me, it's not the same film. Is it better or worse? That's fine. I don't want to get into that argument. It's not the same film. This is the film that I sat down as I would have been 9 years old, sat down in the theater and was totally mesmerized by the special effects, the story, the lived-in look of the movie. Everything was dirty, and the world looked real. It didn't look polished, or it didn't look like a movie set. It looked like they filmed this film film this movie in a real place or real places. You know, the Death Star looked real. The Mos Eisley looked like a real place. You know, the X-Wings looked dirty and used. The Millennium Falcon looked like it had been used for quite a while. All that stuff mattered to me as a kid. It transported me to someplace I had never been, and that was important. But the story, while very, very simple, and the special effects just sort of kept me there, it was literally nothing I'd never seen before. So I just enjoyed it immensely. And yeah, it captured my imagination. You know, Star Wars, the name Star Wars has been dragged through the mud for all sorts of reasons lately. The original trilogy is by far my favorite of everything Star Wars. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and when I say that, I mean this. You know, Clone Wars and the sequel trilogy and the prequel trilogy, all that stuff, you can set all that aside. This is what I talk about when I say I'm a Star Wars fan. Everything else is just icing on the cake, or, you know, what you drop the cake into on the floor. This is Star Wars to me. So that's my number one. That's my top 25 1970s movies. My top 25 favorite 1970s movies, or movies of the 1970s, whatever you want to call it. That's my list. Thank you for sitting through my rambles for 30-some minutes. And if you made it this far, I appreciate your attention span. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you to Tim Talks Talkies for, once again, having this community challenge, event, whatever. I look forward to seeing everybody else's lists. I've already watched Kenny's Movie Palace's list, and it was a great one. Had a lot of things that I hadn't remembered or hadn't thought of in quite some time. You know, comment below what you think. You know, tear me a new one for the two movies that I know you are mad that aren't on here, and the other ones that aren't on here that you thought should be. But again, this is my favorite lists. Post yours. I'd like to see them. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Take it easy.